Good afternoon. My name is Monika Kostera and I'm a sociologist of management. I would like to tell you a short story about how to manage for the common good. We live in difficult times. It's a platitude that has been repeated over and over again, close to an infinite number of times during the history of humankind. Perhaps every generation, at least since a few thousand years, has been hearing prophecies of doom. And yet, there is a difference between these apocalypses of the past and the one that we're facing currently. And it is the following one. Nowadays, we don't have to wait for God or a meteorite to perform it. We have the means of performing our own apocalypse all by ourselves, for the first time in history. Furthermore, the trends and tendencies, if extrapolated, conclude right there with this sinister scenario. We can not only destroy civilization as we know it, but we're able to take down the planet with us. A number of scientists and observers speak of the Anthropocene, by which they usually mean the dark scenario, the scenario of erosion and destruction, that humans are able to perform this scenario to its full capacity in our times. But here, Benjamin Correa is able to perceive two scenarios. One is sinister, the other is different, it's more positive. It's also, according to him, part of the Anthropocene. We are able to destroy the earth, but we are also able to save it. The same means, the same technologies, are able, it's of course the matter of affordance is known to all anarchists in this room. We can use the things we have at our disposal to destroy or to save. So he believes that we're standing at a fork in the road. One ahead of us is a gigantic highway, and it leads into the sinister direction. But there is a small possibility to turn into another path, the Anthropocene in the positive sense of the term. But in order to do this, we need to learn our lessons about the crisis and especially about the common good, because this is what Benjamin Correa is referring to here. We can preserve and defend the common good. And this is the good path that we can all take. It is extremely difficult, especially taking into consideration the fact that, for example, Guy Standing describes in this book that most of the wealth accumulation in the recent years is due to an appropriation and privatization of the common good. How do we change that? Is it even possible to learn the lessons under such circumstances? A number of philosophers and sociologists believe that the ecosystem is teaching us a is trying to teach us these lessons, regardless of the obstacles. And for example, Edgar Morin believes that the pandemic had a few good lessons for us. And if we are able to deal with them, we need to develop a respect for and an ability to make use and respond to complexity, because all these lessons are quite complex. Again, the problem is that we don't know how. We're unprepared. In 1984, Andrzej Zawiślak said that a great deal of the problems with our time stem from our inability to deal with complex problems without resorting to reductionism. Well, nothing in this respect has improved since, quite the opposite. We seem to be going not even in circles, but going back to something even more reductionist. The whole neoliberal era is about reducing complexity into simple, linear forms by the means of the audit culture, benchmarking, metrics, competition, the algorithmic management modes, and so on and so forth. And this doesn't solve any of the problems, it aggravates them. Quite seriously so. According to Bernard Stiegler, we live in times of intense and accelerating entropy. And this term, from complexity theory and from the systems approach, means a dynamics from order to disorder, where energy is consumed and lost in the process. It is irreversible and brings about loss of complexity and diversity, and eventually the death of the system. But if entropy is one overpowering systemic dynamic, it's not the only one. There are others, especially this one, the negenthropy, also from the same terminology. And it means it's a distinctive trait of the ecosystem and a common good of the entire living planet. It's a possibility, a marginal possibility, a seed of something new, or if you like, a leaven, something that can, but does not have to, lead to a difference, a birth of a new system, of a new living system. Or again, in the words of Bernard Stiegler, it's the improbable, the all but impossible, the unlikely, located somewhere out in the margins. So this is a common good, and it's a possibility, a complex possibility. However, each time we hear the term commons or the common good, many of us associate it with the tragedy of the commons. This is a category, an idea stemming from an old article of biologist Garrett Hardin from 1968, which has been cited a large number of times, and it has been called the paradigm of a discussion. What is perhaps less known is that most of these, I claim, probably most of these citations are refutations, in fact. This has been refuted a large number of times. The metaphor is not only socially and culturally simplistic, it's historically false. And it has a huge number of problems. Just one of them, is the problem of management. Hardin disregards completely from the central issue of management. The common good has to be managed in a very special way. So what we really should think of in this context is not the tragedy of the commons, it's the tragedy of mismanagement. It is a lesson that we also can and should learn. Going back to the idea of what the common good is, to very, very briefly summarize it, it contains, according again to Benjamin Correa, of three main elements: the resources which should be shared, the ownership issue by a community, the responsibilities, bonds between the participants are based on the principle of responsibility for the shared good, and thirdly, management, which is based on obligations and right. As you see, management is part and parcel of the category of the common good. You cannot forget about it. It's part of it. And of course, the ecosystem is a large common good, and life on Earth is a common good, but there are also organizational forms of the common good, such as enterprises of common good. And there is a plethora of research on this topic. I have myself been employing myself to ethnographic research for 8 years of so-called alternative organizations, cooperatives and other organizations, which are very resilient and sustainable, and furthermore, they are often profitable. They do well economically, they're economically sound. However, profit is not their aim, it's a means to an end. So perhaps, considering the role of management in the story, we should instead think of the managerial romance of the commons, and especially reading Elinor Ostrom, you get the impression that this is actually something very, very attractive, very warm, very caring, not just coldly resilient, but sustainable in the warm sense, an empathic sense of the word. Communities establish their own rules of managing common resources, including traditions, structures, and cultural norms. So, approaching slowly the conclusion, what we need is a different approach to management. And we need to be paying attention to all those small, impossible, improbable things out there at the margins of the system. Forget about the center. The center does not hold. And think about the alternatives, the possible or the unlikely or even the impossible, but living seeds of something new that might come out of it. Through negenthropic management, we don't know yet what it is exactly going to be, but we have some grasp, some ideas, because there is some good empirical material available. So we know it should be as horizontal dynamics. We know it should be self-managed, and we also know that it should be managed through common deliberation. And I would like to emphasize the common deliberation, because we are not born with it. And Chantal Jacquet, she writes a lot about this issue because it's so problematic. We need to be taught it. There needs to be a huge educational effort directed into this area, how to talk with each other, how to share our knowledge, how to support each other, how to cooperate. We don't need as much education about competition. This is what we desperately and really desperately need these days in order to learn our lessons. So we know how to get there, but we also have some good starting points of departure. And one of them is the existing nice little success stories, a huge number of case studies of alternative organizations. And the other thing is something that Ghislain Deslandes proposes as weak management. We don't need strong managers, we need weak managers. After John Keats's negative ability, the gift not to categorize everything immediately, to stop before the incomprehensible, make room for mystery, make room for the unlikely, for the improbable, for the impossible, for the eccentric, for negenthropy. And hold back judgment, even for a small moment. Hesitate, not to judge, not to decide. Refrain from acting and have the greatest courage of all, the courage to doubt. So finally, yes, there is a possibility to get out of the dark scenario and turn into the positive scenario. And it's part and parcel of humanity. Plato spoke about the etymology of the word human, in Greek, anthropos. According to Plato, anthropos is a word derived from another word, anthropy, which means looking up. The human being is the unique being that looks up, not just sees, but looks up at that which they see. The upward gazer. So, to finish my speech with the reference to Bernard Stiegler's last published work, yes, it is a challenge, but let's try. Bifurquer, il n'y a pas d'alternative. It's of course a reference to Margaret Thatcher's famous quip, there is no alternative. Let's change road. There's no alternative. Thank you very much indeed.